We are now almost there. We are really glad that you all have taken the time to join us this evening, and also looking forward to our conversation tonight. Also looking forward to have others join us out there. Welcome to everyone who's joining for our roundtable on marriage in a pandemic. We'd like to start by introducing ourselves on this panel, and we'll start with introducing ourselves, the host couple, and let Conrad and Lynette and Laverne and Rhonda introduce themselves as well. While we're making introductions on your panel, feel free to post if you're watching this live and introduce yourself. Let us know where you're from, what state you're in, how long you've been married. So
we have been married for 10 years. And when we added up kind of how many years that we've been working with marriages specifically, it's been about 8 years.
And why we love to work with marriages and help other marriages is because we know there's no greater context for Christ's love to be displayed to the world and between that of husband, wife, and a marriage covenant. And when that love and trust and commitment are built there, it brings stability for children, brings stability for families, and children that are raised in a secure and safe and loving, nurturing environment. They're going to be so well equipped to make a difference for Christ in the world and to have an accurate picture of what God's love is like. So working with marriages has been a passion of ours, and it's been a passion of ours to continue working on our own marriage. And every one of the panel guests tonight has in some way been contributors to growth in our marriage, whether classes at RBC or assessments and equipping and hot topic dessert nights. So Conrad and Lynette, why don't you tell us a little about yourselves? How long have you been married, and how long have you helped other couples marriage, and why? Why do you enjoy that work?
We've been married for 47 years, and we were too young to get married, very likely. But we keep working at this growing up together thing. We just think it takes a lifetime, and we're glad we had a good early start to do that.
We went to a marriage encounter weekend about 40 years ago, about 7 years into our marriage, and it proved to be a really helpful thing for us. And it was so helpful, in fact, that we got excited about sharing in that ministry for the next decade. For about 10 years, we worked with that particular marriage building program. Just a few years later, then I shifted from a focus on theological and pastoral education, decided to go the direction of professional counseling, and so that was my educational direction that continued to help us live out that dream of helping others.
We worked together on marriage and family retreats and seminars in the context of pastoral ministry. And then later I finished my degrees, and about 20 years ago became a licensed clinical social worker. So currently we're both in private practice. We almost always do premarital counseling and any couples work together. We think we give our best shot and our best gifts when we work together. Mm-hmm. And often couples are really struggling and in crisis. And so we do better when we work together. We just care about couples, and we care about the children in their homes. And side benefit is we keep learning and maturing in our marriage as we work with couples.
I suspect it's part of our continued growing up together.
There you go. Yeah, we're Laverne and Rhonda Nistley, and we've been married 41 years. Our experience was similar to Conrad and Lynette's in that about 11 years into our marriage, we had attended a marriage weekend. It wasn't Marriage Encounter, but friends of ours had invited us, and we were too busy, and they kept inviting us. And so finally we decided to go for those other couples. We knew a lot of couples that could use the resources, and maybe we could get some things to share with them. And that really became the journey of us working on our relationship, but then also being called to work on with couples and with other marriages. So we did that about 15 years on a part-time basis, and then the last 15 years we've been working together in a nonprofit organization, both on a full-time basis.
Mm-hmm. And so the big why for us is in working with couples is we can see the difference that it makes. And I think very similar to Preston and Liz and Conrad and Lynette, you see your own marriage needing work, and we're continuing to grow. Even though we've been married 41 years, we're still working on it. We're still working on communication. We're still working on how to resolve conflicts. Not a day goes by that we probably don't have some sort of a conflict, but we have the tools now, and to pass those tools along to other couples that can benefit that may not have them. I don't know if you knew this or not, but 75% of people would prefer not to have a marriage like their parents. That's astounding. And that's not something that we would want our kids to say. We would want them to have a marriage. And so that's just part of the vision that we're extending to couples we work with, that you could build a marriage like one that your kids would like to look back on and affirm.
That is an astounding number. 75% do not want to have a marriage like their parents. And this survey, wherever that stat comes from, did not include kids that saw their parents in a pandemic being married. And if you read the news, you read reports about what's happened in China. Bloomberg really caught my attention with an article where they write, although China publishes nationwide statistics on divorce only annually, media reports from various cities show uncoupling surged in March as husbands and wives began emerging from weeks of government-mandated lockdowns intended to stop the spread of the virus. Domestic violence multiplied, and Bloomberg writes, the trend may be an ominous warning for couples in the US and elsewhere who are in the early stages of isolating at home. If absence makes the heart grow fonder, the opposite might be true of too much time spent together in close quarters. And though we, like you, are committed to working and growing in our marriage, we have felt the effects of close quarters and tightness in this season.
Yeah, I mean, it's hit us, and the amount of support, whether it's with babysitting or time alone or being in each other's space. So when he's working from home, all of a sudden he's in my working space and I end up popping in his, and it's very, well, we just feel the tensions in a bunch of different areas.
So what we're wondering is, what's with all of your years of experience, your take on an article like that and the experience that couples are having that are tuning in tonight? And Rich and Bethany, thank you guys for joining. They're in a state of marital bliss, she says in her comment. So that's a wonderful report.
Rich and Bethany Peachy, is that who we're saying hi to?
Yeah.
Great couple.
And everyone else who's joining tonight, we hope that whether your marriage is feeling like that, it's a state of bliss right now, or if it's a hard time, that you're going to be encouraged and reminded of some important things tonight. So, but my question is, my investigative question is this true? Like, is Bloomberg predicting something that's coming? Is it doomsday for marriage in Ohio while we're under this lockdown? If 20, 30 years from now, research is going to look back and be able to say there was the spike of stay-at-home order urged divorces, like this tension led marriages to the breaking point. So I'm kind of curious. I know you're not prophets and you can't predict things, but if you would take an educated guess now, what would your guess be? Will this negatively impact marriages? Will there be an increase in divorce?
If I had to guess, I'd say there probably will be a rise. I find it a really interesting question. I was doing some reading about the Great Depression back in the 30s, where there was really long-term high unemployment. And during that period, divorce rates actually went down, but it seemed to be because people simply didn't have the money to initiate divorce. At the same time, rates of desertion just skyrocketed, and families really fell apart in so many ways. course, a lot has changed in our society since then. Divorce is now no fault and pretty commonplace, as is cohabitation. But I would just say that family units will definitely be impacted negatively in many ways, regardless of what the divorce rates look like when it's all over.
We're really very aware of the added stressors for the couples that we're working with. This can be an especially intense time, especially for couples who were struggling with a lot of negativity, brokenness before this started. Let there be spaces in your togetherness was a popular quote by the Persian poet Gibran in our early years together back in the, I guess it was kind of the hippie days. But we've been working closely together for several decades, and we've needed to learn over those years how to give physical and emotional space. Mm-hmm. But for some couples, this stay-at-home order, it gave very little transition time to a very different kind of sharing space. It was a shock. So our clients, as well as family members and friends, are reporting all kinds of adjustments these days, some much more challenging than others. One introvert spouse says she's used to her quiet office or her quiet home while her children are in school, and she is struggling with the noise level.
I think we've been impacted as well. We kind of observed that in the last 6 weeks, we've probably fought more. We've had more disagreements and arguments and just little bits of tension. And amazingly, the room in the house where it probably happened the most is right over here in our kitchen. We're in a great room right now, but it's right over there. How in the world do conflicts just really kind of escalate in the kitchen? I mean, it's everything from how to load the dishwasher. I mean, I've been loading the dishwasher for years, and suddenly we are in this struggle with regard to how to load the dishwasher, what kind of food to eat, or how this protocol happens. And we kind of don't think that it's those issues themselves as much as deeper issues of trying to have some semblance of control, of certainty. Here's how things are working. That's the deeper issue. And so we've needed to give each other some space. And I think in the last couple of weeks, it's been better.
Yeah, I think we had that adjustment period the first couple of weeks, but I think what we'll find, I know it's definitely putting stress on relationships that are already stressed. I don't think there's any question that domestic violence situations could and probably will get worse. But I think the flip side of that is couples that may not be highly stressed, but may have become disconnected. I think we're going to see this is a time of reconnection. My home office overlooks the street, and to see couples taking walks together, to see families taking walks together, you definitely see that family time, that quality family time. The other thing, and Conrad, you had touched on the depression and how that impacted the divorce rate. And back in 2007, we would have had an economic downturn. What we actually saw in our area was a divorce rate drop, but then couples were coming in saying, we can't afford to get a divorce, so we've decided to work on our relationship. So hopefully the resources available to couples now far outstrip what was available back in the Depression years. So in terms of just abandonment, maybe that there's a little bit of that constraint factor where they may be willing to work.
We did a survey, just an informal survey this last week, just to kind of see what people were dealing with and some of the major changes to their households. A low percentage actually had illness or exposure, 20% job loss, supporting extended family, but the majority, the biggest change was this working from home. And then about 4 out of 10 would have the experience of children now being at home. But look at what the increase in disagreements and arguments were about. A low percentage about financial struggles, some on home education, but this awareness of communication difficulties, intrusions into each other's space, marriage weaknesses exposed and magnified. You know, that's where a lot of those disagreements were coming from. And what really struck us, at least from those who responded to this, we realized this is an informal survey. Probably if you did a random sample, you'd get different numbers, but at least the ones that took the time to respond, they actually saw the quality and satisfaction of their marriage relationship increasing. And so that's something that we celebrate. I mean, anytime there are challenges, there's going to be bad news. And so I agree. I think probably there will be an uptick in divorces, but I think also it gives the opportunity for couples to thrive and to grow. And we heard a lot of comments about some of the things that they did, and more communication, more time for communication. I mean, when you look at the fact that there's a lot less meetings to go to, a lot less things that you'd actually have to get dressed and go outside of the house. I mean, we can walk around our house for a couple of days and not change clothes. Isn't that awesome? I mean, it's like camping.
Now, that could be a stressor on a marriage too, Laverne.
Okay, I'll give you that, Liz.
That's excellent. And as I listen to both of you talk, it almost sounds like for those who it's already bad, it's going to get worse. For those who are stable or good, there's an opportunity to grow.
Yeah.
But does it have to be that cut and dry? How much of this just boils down to decisions people will make right now? Because I heard the other thing, like some people, it's bad and they're right maybe on the edge of divorce, but it's just not feasible to do. So they're actually saying, since we can't divorce, let's try something else. What would you say to that person, Conrad or Lynette, if they're like, we can't get a divorce right now, but we can't keep going like we're doing? What kind of word would you give to them?
Well, we try to give the kind of encouragement toward choosing positive directions. But like when you're already dealing with negative situations, when you're dealing with addictions, and then you have a job loss, I've heard more than one man who, when he's sitting at home, he just escapes into endless hours of video games. So that would be an example of a problem that's already there, but then the stress of not having the normal work and purpose there really can lead to some pretty destructive things.
And some of those spouses are at a breaking point.
Mhm.
And so what we tell them is that this is not a normal time. It's an unusual time. It's not a time to make a negative decision, a long-lasting decision. Hold on, hang on. There are things to do now. And that's why counseling needs to go on even during a time, if it's virtual, if it's just over the phone, it needs to continue, because this is a very stressful time for many couples. Along with addictions is mental health issues like depression and anxiety. And there are what they call corona virus losses. And we know what all those are. There are many. And those can lead to more depression if people are prone to that anyway. And even people who hadn't worried a lot are struggling with a lot of anxious thoughts. So think about what ifs, and that's because those are often what consume an anxious mind. What if I make a loved one sick? What if I cause them to get sick? What if my mother gets sick in an assisted living situation? What if our child can't marry this fall? They're just all kinds of what ifs. So I really encourage couples, what are the what ifs going around in your head? And if you haven't already, share those with your spouse.
That is a good word. Just start talking about it with your spouse instead of keeping it inside. It's a good word.
Really appreciate the professionals in the mental health field like you, Conrad and Lynette. That's a whole segment. It's been dubbed essential business here, at least here in Ohio. That's an essential service that needs to continue happening. However we can make it happening. I'm just kind of curious, how have you guys done it? Have you needed to go more of a virtual setting, at least for a while, or how has that worked for you guys?
Much of that has moved toward either phone or video calls. We've done some of that. We have also continued to see some people here in our offices. We have a large enough home that we can have areas that are spacious enough that we can practice good social distancing even as we're counseling. And then we do extra cleaning. That's the way we've worked at it.
Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, for us, we've done the same thing. We've done mostly Zoom meetings. Those have continued. And in this next week, we'll relax things a bit in terms of kind of moving back at least some of the meetings to our office for those who would prefer. But the default will continue to be Zoom or virtual in a virtual setting.
Yeah.
Just kind of trying to follow the directives that we're getting from the state.
Right.
And Laverne, well, some of the things that you guys have helped us out with, one has been just the Prepare Enrich assessment. That's been so helpful as a tool with couples and also for our own marriage. But two is, the second thing is you have these little helpful prompts, like if you're working through a conflict or you just need to have a daily chat. The Rings chat, when did we learn that? We've been doing that for years now, right?
3 years maybe since.
So we probably had 1,000 Ring chats by now since you guys introduced that to us. And
That is awesome. That is awesome.
Huge. So yeah, keep that up there for a minute and talk to us just about the resources. Because I think any couple that's listening, they're not at the point of desperation, but they are thinking like, yeah, we've had those moments. Like we had one, I still remember one day whenever she came in and sat down and was ready to start talking. I remember looking at her just saying like, you do realize I'm at work right now. Because just the space of the boundaries, the shared space brings a lot more. So why don't you talk us through some of the tools and resources you have for couples that are saying, we want this time to make us stronger, not weaker.
Yeah. So what you're seeing on the screen there is just a simple tool that comes from a Rings experience class. It's a practical experience. It's more a skills-based, and where couples are actually, we demonstrate certain skills and then give them a chance. But this is one of them. And it's actually one that has, the feedback to us has been from many couples. If it weren't for this tool, we would probably be divorced now. And, that always surprises us. How can a simple tool that maybe takes 5 to 10 minutes a day actually have that kind of potency? But the thing is, it gets people talking. It gets the couples talking. And so you want to just kind of summarize what the chat, it's an acrostic.
Yeah, it's an acrostic, and you can see the prompts up there. How am I feeling? And what are my plans today? What do I need from you? What I'm thankful for? And then someday, and that's looking out into the future, making plans to do something you both enjoy. And it's an interactive back and forth. We modify it as needed. Sometimes we spend way too much time on the information and intentions of the day. And so some days it's just, we're going to just do what we're grateful for. Or we're just going to focus on our feelings today. But yeah, if we find ourselves kind of getting stuck in one spot, we have to be intentional about moving ourselves to a different space.
We're actually sitting on the couch where we do our Rings chats. We've been doing these or something like it for about 30 years since that experience that we went to. to in 1990. But if it weren't for us, I mean, it starts here. It has to start here, but it doesn't stop here. And that's what the joy of being able to share resources with other couples so that it can just keep going. Marriages don't have to be cruddy, and I could use other words. They don't have to be terrible. We can actually choose, and so hopefully that's to your point of making decisions.
Thank you, Laverne. Yeah, and you guys have blessed our marriage with that, and every couple that we do premarital counseling with, we're passing that on and passing on life group. Just any chance we get, we encourage people.
Thank you. Is there a royalty that we need to be sending your way on this?
No, I feel like we're dead to you. I told somebody just this week, I said, the conflicts in our marriage decreased after we started doing that plan. And it's like, when you talk about your plans, as simple as that, plans for the day. Oh, you were planning to do that tonight. Well, I was thinking about this. And you realize, had this conversation not happened in the morning, after dinner, we would have been on different pages.
Yeah.
You usually do them in the morning. Is that the best time for you guys?
Not too early.
Not super early, or else he'll just get a pre-coffee glare.
I I didn't know I was a morning person until I married Liz. I didn't know that. So, but yeah, our tradition is to have devotions, have a cup of coffee, and then warm up a little bit, and then have a rings chat before I go start my day. And those days go well, and when we miss it, we notice. Like it will. Yeah. It's like, oh, we missed our rings chat this morning. So as we've heard each other talk back and forth a little bit, first of all, the big stage we're in again is we're in a pandemic, so there's extra stress on marriage, but that the jury's still out on what happens. So like, there could be someone listening tonight who could be a statistic of a divorce, or there could be someone listening tonight who's going to come out with a marriage that one day their kids will say, I hope I have a marriage like mom and dad someday. And that's why we're here. And I wanted to just thank Jesse and Janelle Showalter for joining us. They've been married 1 year. They would also know Conrad and Lynette very well. Teresa for joining us. Catherine Beachy for joining us. Hey, Dad. My dad, Eli Yoder, is joining us. Verna Bender, artist. Diller, Lester and Artist. They are in Pennsylvania. They've been married for 42 years. And they also happen to be, they did a wonderful job raising their daughter.
Hi, Mom.
Who I married. And then Tim Miller, he's a pastor in Delaware. And just so you know, I saw him do a video post yesterday where he said, you are essential. And he was making the case, we are all essential. And so whenever, when we use that language, when we, like, some of us are essential, I think it's a good reminder that everybody.
That's a great thing to say to our partners every day too now, isn't it? You are essential.
Could that be an E in the rings chat? Ring as essential. You're essential. And also yes. Kaylee and Travis Tice, welcome to you guys. Thanks for joining. They've been married 6 years. So we've got a wide range of people watching. But as we've been talking, any questions that came to your mind as you heard, Conrad, one I had for you is just the Great Depression. You can see a tick, like historically, you look at it, there is an uptick in divorce from that time. Is that what I heard you saying?
Oh, just the way that divorce has become much more common in our culture. That's certainly changed since the 30s. I'm not quite sure if I'm getting a question though.
Oh, did times of distress cause an increase in divorce historically? Like,
actually, the Great Divorce, it declined.
Oh, it declined. Okay.
The divorce rate declined, but desertion just skyrocketed.
Desertion did.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Many men, when they lost their jobs and had no hope, they simply walked away.
So
one of the reasons for some of the stress right now is a couple of those we were noting that we've often told our marriage and family class and just other seminars that we just can't meet each other's complete emotional needs. I need women friendships, Conrad needs men friendships, and we need other people pouring life into us, which adds to our marriage. And during this time, this has been very difficult for many of us to have connections with those significant people.
We haven't talked much about the difference between introverts and extroverts. Some of the memes out there, suggest that for introverts, we're just in our happy place with this quarantine. But even those of us who are a little more introverted, I think I'm becoming aware of how I'm dependent on certain structures for those connections. So I really do miss church. Listening to a sermon being live streamed is great. Joining a worship service where I can actually control the volume without earplugs is great. But I don't get to talk to my friends after church. That's what can't be replaced there. And now with a shutdown, especially for my age group, I can't even go to Menards to, the local home improvement store to where I often run into friends and we can have, man-to-man chats about all sorts of things. So some of those structures, even for introverts, it's a loss. And yeah.
What about for extroverts?
Well, I have found, I think it was the first 2 weeks of the pandemic, I was doing a lot of Zooming or FaceTime Messenger with friends, but I would walk away kind of feeling empty. It didn't do it like the face-to-face does. And so when you were talking, Lynette, and talking about how we need those outside relationships, it just struck me well, we can try and get it virtually, but there really is something missing for that gender to gender, the female. And I think I feel that.
So really what that leaves us with in a pandemic is the people who are together, not in a virtual setting, but they are kind of stuck. And so what an opportunity to make that work. I think some of the most enriching times for heroes in Christian history have been when they are just kind of isolated. I mean, look at Joseph's prison experience, Paul's prison experience. I mean, just fruitful times where, you think, I'm not being productive. I'm just not being able to have my freedom. God can use those times, and we just extend hope to couples. If that's where you are, man, we'd love to talk to you. I think counselors, if you're really finding yourself stuck and you can't kind of get out of some cycles on your own, there is help. Don't wait too long. The average, I've heard someone say that the average couple that really should be seeking help waits 6 months too long. 6 months. That's half a year. That's a lot of time that goes by. So don't wait.
And we're aware that just to add on to that, Laverne, that the couples who are really struggling, who are hanging on by a thread, so to speak, are probably not watching right now. They're not with us, but they may be your children, or they may be your neighbors, or someone that you go to church with. And if you're able, as an individual or a couple or a church, offer financial help for counseling. I mean, I always say there's no bad time to ask for help, but right now, financially, it is a hard time for some people. So offer to help with that financial cost.
That's a great word. And that's what community can do. And even though we're experiencing some isolation from that community support, there are so many ways to reach out. And if you're watching this and you think of a couple that you care about and are concerned about, you could just start by sharing this panel with them and letting them know that we're here. While you all were talking, I was thinking about grief, and Tim Miller, who's joined the event tonight, he comments about they're doing well, but stresses and griefs and pressures are very great. It made me think, what is the impact of grief and what are the opportunities that come with grief just for this moment? Because grief can impact couples and take them apart, right? But how could it bring them together?
I have to admit that this particular moment has not been one of the most difficult in my life. But if I think to what have been some of the most stressed moments for me when it comes to career and identity transitions, all of those sorts of difficult things, that's where I know the value of counseling, the value of getting an outside perspective to help us stay on the same page. And I look back at some of those times, and I would say I'm so grateful for the way Lynette really joined me in the pain that I was dealing with. And so the whole thing of just couples really turning toward each other to really be there for each other in the most difficult times. That's what I would want to encourage couples who are experiencing really difficult things now.
We had some friends who delivered a stillborn baby, and the funeral director came and talked to them and encouraged them to be especially kind to each other. We have never forgotten that. And in times of stress, we will often go back to that bit of advice. We need to be especially kind to each other.
And I think just our own experience, we've learned, we both process grief and loss very differently. And, just to have that outside counselor at times walk through those times with us and help us to see it's not a right or wrong. It's just different in the way we process the timing, and we may be at different stages at different times. And so definitely, I think that is a time to be kind to each other, but don't hesitate to bring in an outside counselor.
Yes.
I would say amen to those words, and counseling has benefited my life. And it's like there's things that you work through, the counseling can help you work through it at times, but it can give you that outside perspective so you know how to get back on the communication track. Because there's some things when you're doing a rings chat, Laverne, you don't just naturally go to. Like, I feel like an absolute failure today. I don't know what to do. The stress of this is getting to me. It's like, for some guys, it's easier to say, oh, I feel fine. I feel good. No, I don't. So that deeper work of working through those things and then coming back to rings chats and hearing this especially kind thing makes me just want to say, I'm sorry. I've not been especially kind, and especially today, actually. It was a point of like, we're doing a Zoom chat on this tonight, and we're just both grumping around the house.
We're a perfect case study for pressure coach marriage.
But something that is so refreshing. I think all three of us couples, we're not heroes. We're not, we are still a work in progress. I think I speak for all of us. Because we are, and it's so refreshing to see other leaders just plain being honest, as opposed to, hey, we got this tool for you that you really got to try, and if you do this, your life will be. That's not humility at all. And I think rather approaching it as, here's some insights, some encouragement, some hope. I'll be there. Right, we're right here beside you. We're walking together. We're in this together. That just breaks down barriers, I think, and it puts it within reach of everybody. So
yeah.
When I think about the stress increasing in a relationship when we're stuck at home, one of the real opportunities is to find a deeper acceptance of my spouse. It becomes pretty easy to see all the things that my spouse is doing that should be done differently. But
Could you list those, Lynette? Would you please list?
The list is really long.
let's see, were you guys talking before this about how dishwashers get loaded, those kinds of things? We have a lot of spatial orientation issues. But anyway, just deeper acceptance, just like you're saying, recognizing that we're really different. We're different in the way we process grief. We're different in the way we approach a problem, the way we think about all these things. So that's one that I keep, especially when I know I'm stressed. Okay, it's time to just take another step of growth in just loving Lynette as she is.
Praise God.
We were just talking earlier about how grateful we are to be able to make the choice to extend grace and space. I think especially during this time of being a little more kind of on top of each other, and really it's not so much physically being on top of each other, it's more of an emotional, you're crossing paths a lot more often. I think I just saw one of your kids cross right behind you, or is a really big dog. I'm not sure that was so
it was a sunbeam, Laverne. But
okay. So the whole thing of extending grace and space to each other. I mean, God has done that for us. He actually gives us space when we need it, when we just feel like, man, I can't take this.
Mm-hmm. And some of it comes down to just making the decision, like you said, to accept your spouse and to love, right? Because the thing I was thinking about specifically that I got convicted when Lynette was talking about was I was sitting in the chair and I was determined to finally read my book, and I heard Liz in the kitchen say something about she wasn't feeling well and she wondered if she should be making supper, like handling the food, if she's not feeling well, if she's sick. And I was like, did you wash your hands? And I kept reading my book. And looking back, I'm sorry.
I washed my hands.
Looking back, that was definitely a clue for me that I could have picked up on, and turning towards her and saying, let me come help make dinner. I regret at this moment. So thank you all for that reminder. And I think part of the challenge for me is whenever I feel stressed and on empty, then sometimes I just don't act like I want to act. And I don't want this to turn into a counseling session for us, but I do want to open the door.
4 counselors at the same time in a room. Can't wait to see that now.
Yeah, this is how we get free counseling, right? We say, hey,
do a Zoom chat and invite them.
But for other couples that can relate to that, and they say, you know what, we want to stay in love while we're home together, and we want to take this as an opportunity, but it is stressful, it is hard. What would be just advice you would give? Where would you start? And we're listening. We need it, and our friends, those that are joining tonight too. What would you just say to them? The place of grace to start. So kind of Lynette, you want to take.
As I think about thinking about my wife, thinking about Lynette, the need is that deeper acceptance. When I think about myself, then the challenge is to focus on greater self-awareness, actually seeing myself. And this one really hit me a decade ago in a time of conflict, where I had to wrestle with, okay, how do I contribute to conflicts? What are the things that make me so difficult to live with. And the tool that was really helpful for me about a decade ago was the Enneagram, and I started working with that. And I really liked that because that particular tool helped me look at weakness, sort of the besetting sin of my personality, and my gifts and strengths. And I really like that because it's both. But being able to look at myself and get that deeper awareness of why I'm really hard to live with. And I can pretty easily say at this point now, yeah, my moral and relational perfectionism can really drive people around me crazy. And they start to feel somehow that they have to live up to my standard. And I don't intend that much of the time, but that's the way it comes through. And so again, stressful times are wonderful opportunities to really learn more about ourselves.
I would just add, Laverne, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead and complete. Yeah.
I just want to point out during this time how many people, this is something totally different, but how many people need touch. And I just want to encourage all of us with the people who we are spending a lot of time with. And for many of us are quarantining with our spouse. And that's why we're talking about this tonight. But, researchers pretty much agree we need 8 to 10 meaningful touches a day to even be healthy, physically and emotionally. And so this is a wonderful opportunity to reach out to a spouse and meaningfully touch them during the day. I mean, touch can be so healing, can be comforting, it can be calming, it can give us hope. Mm-hmm. And so I really want to encourage all of us with whoever. A lot of us are, I mean, it's a thing. It's touch deprivation. Some people are calling it skin hungry. We're missing hugging our grandchildren. For many of you who have grandchildren close, or so, I mean, this isn't true for everyone, but do reach out to that spouse. A wonderful time to touch.
I think another thing that we would encourage is pay attention to the emotions. And a simple tool, you can go out and Google this, emotional jug, and you'll see a diagram of a jug with a whole bunch of emotions. The more intense emotions are anger, sadness, fear. Those are like the big chunks of emotion. And sometimes we run away from emotions. I especially don't like it when Rhonda is angry, especially if it's with me. But one of the things that we have really found release with is this emotional jug exercise, where you basically say, what are you mad about? What else are you mad about? And just continue to give permission to share. Then what are you sad about? What else are you sad about? What are you scared about? What are you scared about? Just continue asking. And then end with, what are you glad about? What is it that is making you happy? And it's amazing the difference of taking the pressure off of some of those pent-up emotions. I mean, we do have pent-up emotions where, we hear these new newscasts of all kinds of polarization going on and politicization. And it just kind of gets you riled up, and so to be able to kind of, well, I'm mad about this, or I'm scared about this. So paying attention to the emotions, I think, is something that I think we value.
Yeah, I think looking at this as an opportunity versus challenge, opportunity for families to spend time together, opportunities to take walks. When you look at how busy our lives are going, to athletic events, which we enjoy that too. Going to the larger big group events. Of course, as an introvert, I'm not fond of those anyway. Although I do miss church. I miss the small groups. But here's a time where we don't have all those people to connect with, but it's a huge opportunity to deepen this relationship. And so, yeah, just focus on that opportunity piece of it.
I love that word opportunity. And that is what I hope that everybody that's listening is taking away, because we can get in the grind and feel like we can't wait for this to be over. But to shift our thinking and say, what's the opportunity that I have in this moment that I won't have? And we were talking about that the other day, and I told her, I said, if at some point there was no pandemic, but someone just told me you are going to have every meeting canceled, and if you have a meeting, it's going to be at home on your computer. You're going to be able to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner with your family. That sounds like heaven, right? That sounds like a wonderful opportunity. Take walks in the evenings and go camping in our backyard. So I think that's a good word, and to keep finding those creative things to do to be able to be fully present. For me, leaving media behind for hours at a time, even half a day at a time, not reading the news has been an extremely helpful exercise, because my mind can get going to the what ifs, what if, and step away from it to be present has been a helpful thing for me.
Yeah, I like combining kind of what both of you guys said, and like Conrad, you were talking a lot about for people to just look inwardly a little bit and say, like, how am I wired and how am I operating through this? And then Laverne, for you to kind of be looking outward and saying, how can I give my spouse space to get their negative stuff out? And if both of those things happen for couples, then there is going to be connection happening in a marriage. And that's just beautiful to see those two pieces.
It is. And Conrad and Lynette, we have a hello from Kathy Brenneman. Hi, Lynette.
Hi,
Thank you, Thelma, also for joining us. And she says, extending grace and space. I like that. That's my takeaway. Anybody else who's listening, if you have a question, feel free to type it in the chat there. We have a little bit of time left to answer a question or two. So if you have a question, feel free to comment. And if you haven't yet, let us know that you're watching, who you are, and how long you've been married, if you're married. If you're single, that's great too. You can ask any question you want. This is a very open panel tonight.
Conrad, we have just a couple of more responses from the survey. I thought in terms of what couples have said, what has helped you cope? I mean, just take a look at some of these where it's, like the first one, they're having time to talk a little more, learning to work together in the kitchen better than we ever have before. You'd think that Ron and I did that when we didn't. Being able to connect and comfort each other during difficult times, taking walks together, making decisions, times of laughter, lightheartedness, being intentional about staying connected, taking walks, car rides together, just purposeful dates, back porch, safe excursions, constant work and communication on how we can help each other. Just remember, we are a team and we value this extended time as a family. So that comes from people that we've just reached out to, and they've given us what has worked for them. It's a wide range of things. So very, very practical.
Yeah. That's
a great list, and hopefully every couple's jotting down some ideas right now. I know I am. I'm going to help make supper next time. We do have one though that's kind of a comment that's just a reminder that even those things are still tainted by what we're living through. Carolyn Yoder Miller comments, I'm actually more scared about touch because since I live with an essential worker, both of us put a high value on kissing. So what would you say to that person? I have no idea. That's why you guys are here.
Conrad and Lynette, you guys are the kissers in this.
Yeah, show us the mug. Show us the mug.
Yes, we are. This is the mug
Really
I'm
funny
using.
stuff. That's great.
And it says, have you had a 6-second kiss today? And it's by John Gottman, who's one of the marriage researchers. And when I first read this, I came home so excited. I said, Conrad, guess what I read today? It says we're supposed to have every day a 6-minute kiss. And he said, Lynette, that's an awful long time. And I went back and checked and I said I was wrong. It was 6 seconds.
Oh my.
Anyway, I often have
Always the romantic.
Let's take it to the next level.
So I've often wondered if we actually routinely, when we're well and when it's a different kind of time, had a 6-second kiss, which is not just a peck on the cheek. It means we are really connecting, and we don't give 6-second kisses to anyone else. Then how would that be? How could that kind of make us feel connected over the long haul? So in answer to that other question, that is just hard. That's
We're going
hard.
to take a 6-second kiss right now. So
Can you wait till
Time,
later?
everybody. 6
Thank you.
seconds.
wasn't that awesome?
You're welcome to do that at home. Do not post the video of your 6-second kiss challenge. Just keep that between the two of you.
So I just say I care really deeply about the people who are giving in ways that are extremely sacrificial. And some of them aren't seeing each other. They're not living together right now for that reason. And they don't share intimacies in the same kind of way. And so I would just say, beef up all the other ways, writing notes, texting, and any other ways that you can be intimate, playful, loving. Yeah.
And just a reminder to be grateful. I mean, I think about single people who are living alone with no one to really connect well with. That's a very different experience. And I'm grateful for a spouse to be stuck with, if you will, during this kind of time.
Yeah,
It's a blessing.
that's a good answer. We've got another question from Greg. Greg asks, advice how to connect with a full house of kids. Honey, that's you.
We're still trying to figure it out. So what about the experts? What do they have to say?
We don't have kids at home.
So I know the guy that asked the question. He's a good friend of mine, and actually his kids are a little bit older, and so I don't think it's like the really young kids. But how do you connect? I have seen some Facebook posts. Faith Bosland. If you're Facebook friends with Faith, their family has done some really fun and creative things, and their kids would be a little bit older. I think they may be elementary and older, but I look at some of the creativity of families out there. They're really very good. But I also think that there are times that we don't let the kids sabotage this relationship. Our kids knew when we were doing rings chats. And even when they were grown and married, they may be in the basement coming upstairs, and they say, "Oh, are you guys doing?" They realize that there's a boundary there, and they respected that. And so to make almost an invisible fence around you, where this is us time, or go somewhere where you can do that.
Boundary is such a good word for this, isn't it? When you're separating work and life, and you're protecting your relationship with kids. And Greg also said that he's been married for 26 years. Congratulations, Greg and Donna. And Roger Ronchecker celebrated 37 years of marriage yesterday, and feeling blessed to be listening to you all. Congratulations to the Boncheckers. What about that? An anniversary.
I know them too, from Northern Indiana. It's so good.
Oh, okay.
Congratulations. Yes.
Great. And Jared, the Chases are watching 15 years in September. So see you, Jared. Thanks for joining us. Well, why don't we go around and give one last word of encouragement to wrap out our time together? Just as we've been talking, we know that there are real couples with from 1 year to 37 to 42 years watching, joining us this evening, and just go around and share a final word of encouragement with each one.
Ultimately, God created marriage. And so why not talk to him together every day through prayer? I think for those who have a faith background, the couples that pray together on a daily basis have less than a 1% chance of marriage failure. It's pretty significant.
I think the principles for staying in love probably are pretty much the same as they have been before the pandemic. We may need to apply them differently, but the simple truths are still what we need. The fruits of the Spirit still make for sweet relationships.
One thing that I've been pondering is how with the pandemic, we never know like when it's going to end, like when is this going to lift? And so having something to look forward to each week in our relationship has just been really good for me. Like whether that's we're going to go on a family drive and go get coffee on this day. And I know that we have a bright thing to look forward to, while a lot of those other bright things are kind of gone right now. So finding something fun and looking forward to it.
I would tag on to that. Know your spouse's love language. It's a great time to discover how your spouse is wired. You see them up close, and her love language is fun. So there's also others, touch and gifts and quality time and words of affirmation, service, and whatever that love language is. It's a great time to become fluent in it, to work at it. It becomes more natural than others. But while you're there together, figure it out and love on each other. Anybody else want to weigh in with the last word of encouragement?
I just want to say one thing about anxious. We talked about anxiety earlier, and just one of the best ways to work with that is to really live in the present, not the regrets of the past or the what ifs of the future. And one of the little exercises that we can do as spouses or as a family, whether you're on a little road trip to that special getting groceries or whatever it is just be aware of the beauty around you, the nature, and using all your senses. So 5 things you see, and 4 things you hear, and 3 things you smell, and 2 things you I forgot which one I was not on, and 1 thing you taste, but all your senses. And you can do that with your children. But we have just watched birds more during this time. We have taken walks in the woods and flowers. And so just be present, be where you are, see God everywhere.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you all so much for joining this panel discussion tonight. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen with us. May the Lord bless you and keep you and make his face shine upon you. May he be gracious to you. May he give peace to you as a person, peace in your marriage and peace in your home. God bless and have a good night.
Bye-bye.